How is again? Let's go. Right. Global warming. So, yeah, I want to talk about this astro-theology or astro-theology, however you want to pronounce it. It's two words for bullshit, basically. Now, why astrotheology is pure bollocks is, let me explain let's talk about what it was. About 8 or 9 years ago in the alternative scene, it became very big through people like Jordan Maxwell in particular. And it was also around the same time the freeman of the land thing was picking up, and people were saying words are spells. You spell words. These kind of cliches. Then saying things like, he was saying things like, when you're birthed like a boat, and all this. The dock in the courthouse, the dock, the bar. It's the same as a sandbar on a beach. It's to do with the maritime law and all this nonsense, which is absolute rubbish. Anyone who took that crap into court ended up losing everything, and because it was all made up nonsense. And so is the astrotheology, and I'll start to explain that in a minute. But so the astrotheology stuff sat in very well at that period. Sat in very well in that period with the whole freeman of the land stuff, because it kind of like the two things had crossovers. And you had this whole thing then. Not only did Jordan Maxwell give this kind of stuff to people, but you had people like Santos Bonacci who were doing both the astrotheology stuff and the freeman on the land stuff, until he ended up being on the run from the police. It doesn't work. It never worked. And the astrotheology stuff doesn't work either, because it's rooted in the same thing of sounds like must be, and this kind of thing. Now, for first of all, it's the astrotheology thing is this belief that somehow all the characters in the Bible are representations or allegories or symbols of things in the heavens, like the astrological symbols. Now, this is completely made up and invented by basically theosophists. And if you look at people such as Jordan Maxwell, they all come out of the theosophist worldview. Now, you know the way the the Bolsheviks never went away. The Bolsheviks became, socialists, but they were still there under a new name. Then they became critical theorists in the 1950s. And then they became eventually the global warming parties and stuff like that. But they were still always the same Bolsheviks underneath. Well, astrotheology works the same way. It's still Christian, or should I say Second Temple Rabbinical Judaism, given a new name. Second Temple Rabbinical Judaism is what the character representing Jesus Christ is. Now, according to the Romans, at the time, AD, say AD 30, so on, around that period, AD 33, there was something like 40 or 41 messiahs in Jerusalem. And this was accepted under traditional Jewish law, because there was a belief that there could be multiple messiahs, and the Messiah was the savior of the Jewish people, not the savior of mankind. And in relation to the Romans in particular. So you had everyone. It was just like the life of Brian. You had messiahs all over the place, of which Rabbi Yeshua, you know him as Jesus Christ, was one of them. Now, basically, what these guys did was they would fulfill the prophecies of Elijah, and that was how they would do this, and they would generate followers who would follow them, just like you have cults today who have people following them. The reason why mainstream rabbis didn't like them is because they were basically cult leaders. That's basically what you were dealing with. And the Romans didn't particularly care, and this is one of the problems that the actual Orthodox rabbis within Jerusalem and within in Judea had a big problem with the Romans. They were trying to get them to crack down on these messiahs. But they were all over the place. So anyway, this Rabbi Yeshua guy, who probably didn't exist, or is most likely an amalgamation of several different messiahs that were operating within Second Temple Rabbinical Judaism at that time. When Second Temple Rabbinical Judaism came into Europe, By about the 5th or 6th century, it had converted itself into something called Christianity, naming itself Christianity. And then by the 7th century, started to distance itself from Judaism, mainstream Judaism, and then they started becoming anti-Semitic and so on. Now, Second Temple Rabbinical Judaism, or Christianity as you know it today, this is why it referred to in the apostolic missals of Ireland, referred to the native Irish as Gentiles. These Christian monks and bishops and followers did not see non-Christians as, or did not see Christians as Christians. They saw them as Gentiles. They were Jews. These were Jewish rabbis. This is what you were dealing with. So those of you today who call yourself Christians, you're actually a Jew. You're actually a Jew, and the same with the Muslims as well. You're just another kind of Jew. Nothing wrong with that, and nothing wrong with Judaism at all. But just you should be just aware of that, okay? Now, this started to fade off. Christianity started to die in the West, in the English-speaking world. It was already dead in places like France. Around from the 1700s, the Enlightenment on. And the Second Temple Rabbinical Judaists, the Christians, needed a way to keep their cult going, their religion going. So they rebranded it under the name of this thing called Theosophy. Now, Theosophy is basically a German movement. They all seem to come out of Germany for some reason, and just like communism. And this Germanic movement of Theosophy quickly spread among the middle classes all over the world, and by the time we reached World War I, was a huge religion. Theosophy, people don't remember, magazines like Bibby's Monthly had constant Theosophist articles inside, some of them very, very interesting reads. Now, Theosophy was kind of like New Age Christianity. That's really what it was. So it was repackaged under a new name. They also were Presbyterian based, so therefore they took the literal meaning of Lucifer due to a mistranslation in the King James Bible of a Hebrew term as it being the devil, when Lucifer was never the devil. Lucifer is a pagan god, and that was a mistranslation that was made in the King James Bible. So anyway, using all that, they were incorporated. This was at the same time spiritualist churches, and spiritualism was at the fore. You have the likes of many very big-time seances. In fact, Bibby's Monthly, you can get your hot copies on a hold of some of those magazines. They're very good reads, very interesting. And around World War I, a friend of mine let me borrow some from a few months back, and they're actually beautiful, beautiful productions. But they've got very good, interesting, like I said, articles, mostly by Theosophists in them. The Theosophists were interested in all contexts. They were the first New Agers, okay? So they also incorporated Hermeticism, things like that. Now, everything except paganism, of course. That's how you always know. If there's no paganism, you know what you're dealing with then. So you got your Romans, you got your Egyptian stuff and all this kind of thing. And the belief was that it gave people hope, particularly in World War I, had lost so many sons in the trenches and husbands and brothers. And so you had that element of that, this element of it, that you would contact your dead person, they were in heaven and all this kind of thing. And they rebuilt Second Temple Rabbinical Judaism in the form of Theosophy. So now that's where all this astro-theology stuff really came to the fore. So they would say to people who would probably be not Christian inclined, using actually basically a pagan idea that, well, no, the gods, it's not real, they're not beings, they're actual symbols of concepts in allegories connected to astrology. So they say, well, the 12 apostles were the 12 signs of the zodiac, and Jesus was not the S-O-N of God, but the Son of God. So he represents the movement of the sun through the zodiacal cycle. And when you first hear this, you think to yourself, well, that sounds tremendously interesting. But it's not really. It's made up because it's from the same sounds like must be mentality. And so therefore, like one of the classic ones they have is that we're moving from the age of... The reason why Jesus had a symbol of a fish was because he was born in the age of Pisces. And we're now moving into the age of Aquarius. Now, this sounds fantastic at times until you realize that it's not that. It's all made up. It was just a handy coincidence they had. And you have all kinds of other things like this where they say everything is an allegory. Well, of course it's an allegory, but it's also true. It's also true. The reason, it's also true. So you have this whole thing that the sun would rise. Then you would incorporate things like Egyptian theology, the rising of Horus and having his throat slit by Set at the end of the day. And these are fantastic stories, but they would try to amalgamate them into the Christian thing. And then you had this, to the point now you have this nonsense about Saturn. Saturn is Satan. No, it's not. Oh, it must be Satan because there's a picture of Saturn eating a baby. No, that's a metaphor and allegory from paganism, from classical paganism, to show that from the moment you were born, you were dying. And Saturn reminds you that life is short, and you must live your life because you will be harvested. Your life will be harvested once by the night cycles of nature, and that's all that represents. And it's actually that's actually got more truth connected to it, because you can actually see Saturn was the last visible planet to the human eye. They didn't know there was anything beyond it. And to them in those days, that was just a star, but a planetoid, a wandering star. They didn't know there were different planets. They suspected they were different than stars, but they just considered them a different kind of star who wandered through the heavens. Now, see, this is how the Theosophists made Christianity survive. They dovetailed it into astrology, which was starting to grow very popular at that time. And therefore, it was just another co-option, just like the Green Party are now the Bolsheviks are now the Green Party. It's the same people, the same mentality, but under a different name. And they're always, this is why, and like when you read, like I read an awful lot of Theosophist stuff, and it's very interesting, and it's a lot of it is psychobabble as well. It's it's waffling. It's absolute waffling to get to it, but there is some gems in there, in terms of things like how, I mean, they get so right about Lucifer on some levels, about Lucifer being the god of this planet, which he is, and then they apply the whole thing of the fallen angel in the Bible. So it always comes back to the Bible. Lucifer's not in the Bible. Lucifer is like Satan. Was only invented by the Catholic Church about 1,000 years ago to make poor people's lives even more miserable. But but it's it's amazing how it became a kind of a trend, and then it vanished. It's because it gets you nowhere. It gets you. This is the problem with these things. All these biblically induced solutions, which we say, where see, people are afraid to say that Bible is bullshit and Jesus Christ didn't exist, and Jehovah is a psychopathic demon. Because they think they're going to burn in hell at some level. They cannot escape it. So they think, but they know that's evil as well. They know the Bible is bullshit, and they know that, like, in books like Leviticus, they're horrific, and the old Jewish text, the God is terrifying. Jews have a better relationship with that, by the way. They understand that God is a dualistic force, or the power force, the tetragrammaton, is a dualistic force of good and evil, and you have to balance both. So Judaism has it much better. Christians take it literally, but they're afraid they're going to go to heaven. They won't see Jesus. So what they say is, oh, it's all astrotheology now, and so Jesus is the son of God, like son in the sky of God, And so it's cowardice. It's the coward's panacea. If Christianity doesn't work for you, reject it. Actually, it will never work for you, because it's an alien religion to your European soul, to your Indo-European or Proto-European soul. It's an alien religion. Hinduism is much closer to what you'd want to be in terms of spiritual identity, but you have to keep it going because you're afraid. You play the astrotheology thing because you think there might be a chance that maybe heaven and hell is real, and the whole thing, or maybe the Satan is real, even though that was an invented thing, and so on. And it all gets tied up into your head, into this nonsense that makes you turn your brain to your mush, and you're not thinking straight. Look, think straight, okay? What is the one thing that you can point to that you know is real? Nature, okay? What is paganism? The veneration of nature through symbolic, anamorphic, or zoomorphic archetypes that represents the human consciousness in terms of its psyche, soul, relationship to the cycles of nature, and that includes things as reincarnation and so on. There it is. No, none of you can point to your God. I can point to my God. It's that woodland over there. It's that beach over there. It's those stars in the sky. It's that river over there. And it's me and you all connected to it. So why do you still need Second Temple rabbinical Judaism? That at the very most, the only thing you can confirm is, whether it's in the form of Catholics, Protestants, Theosophy, whatever, what is it? What can you point to at the end of the day that you know is true? Only one thing. Only one thing. That the Jehovah entity in the Old Testament is a psychopathic demon. And that's it. And if you want to hedge your bets spiritually and play for that card only out of fear that the Son of God might exist, well, you're betraying your own soul. Take care.